Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. This video will provide a brief introduction of the poet and the poem. Arnold was an English poet and a cultural critic. He is known to have created a storm of social and cultural criticism of the Victorian world with his prose, poetry, and essays. He is recognized as the third most influential writer of the Victorian Age after Tennyson and Robert Browning. Arnold received a degree in classics from Oxford and spent most of his life working as a school inspector. He was elected as a professor of poetry at Oxford in 1857 based on his flair for poetry and criticism. His poems are known for its melancholic and mournful tone. Arnold believed that poetry should be for the criticism of life, and he incorporated a philosophical approach to anchor mankind in the testing times of the Victorian Age. Arnold believed that poetry is simply the most delightful and perfect form of utterance that human words can reach. Some of his famous poems and collections include Dover Beach, The Strayed Reveller and Other Poems, Empedocles on Etna and Other Poems, Merope, and New Poems. Arnold's famous works of criticism include Essays in Criticism and Culture and Anarchy. He called himself a believer in culture and became a critic of the Victorian spirit, scrutinizing the modern world. Victorian Age, as we know, was the time of unrest and mayhem. It was the period of materialism, democratic expansion, and scientific advancements. Arnold's works present a strong criticism for the age and the spiritual and religious distress that was shaking the society. Matthew Arnold, as a critic, saw the Victorian Age as an age of conflict between human heart and mind and science and religion that put the age in the clutches of doubt and greed. Industrial revolution added to this conflict by creating materialistic prosperity for the rich and widening the gap between the rich and the poor. London had undergone a rapid population growth, which could not match up to the technological advancements. A large number of people felt worthless, and this took a toll on human happiness. Intellectuals and literary figures attempted to address such conflicts with lucidity and directness. Arnold, too, mirrored the melancholic tone of the time in his poetry and criticism. Dover Beach is said to be a great representation of the Victorian period, as Arnold reacted more violently to the spiritual distress and meaninglessness of his age. He depicts the tone and mood of the society. Arnold was at the peak of his career when he started working on Dover Beach from 1851 to 1857. The poem evokes a sense of loneliness and faithlessness, as Arnold does not restrict to a particular subject in the poem. He is seen to be lost and lonely, similar to most Victorian people. With the rapid social, scientific, and technological developments, people were drifting towards more scientific views and discoveries away from the religious teachings and beliefs. Dover Beach opens on a hopeful note, but towards the end of the poem, Arnold exposes the reality and harshness of the world. He takes on a critical tone, expressing his doubt and discontent at the changing attitude and conditions of the people. It was observed by intellectuals that Victorians witnessed a deep sense of melancholy and anxiety as the changes around them were too sudden and swift to adapt to. This human incapability to adjust to the new world is reflected in the poem. Arnold uses a serious tone to convey a feeling of displacement and alienation, as his learnings and knowledge seemed redundant and insignificant for the new Victorian world. His skeptical attitude echoes in the poem. It is believed that Arnold began writing the poem in 1851 when he visited Dover. Dover Beach was first published in 1867 in the collection New Poems. Many critics believe that the poem was Arnold's response to the social and religious turmoil created by the publication of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. Darwin's book created the infamous crisis of faith. Darwin's Origin of Species explained the supreme importance of science in the creation of man and challenged the religious belief in God. As a result, men began to feel pessimistic, lonely, and isolated in the universe. Darwin's theory of evolution threatened the value of tradition, religion, and morality. This was known as the crisis of faith, and Dover Beach clearly emphasized the ongoing crisis and conflict. The title and the subject of the poem's descriptive opening lines is the shore of the English fairy port Dover in France at the Strait of Dover. Arnold uses the setting as the title of the poem to announce its symbolic significance in the poem. Dover is along the southeast coast of England. It is the setting of the entire poem. It is located on the Strait of Dover. Strait is a narrow passage of water. Strait of Dover separates England from France. Arnold had visited Dover in 1851 with his wife during their honeymoon, where he wrote the first draft of the poem. Arnold uses vivid imagery and visual descriptions of the beach. He refers to the cliffs of Dover, which hold a symbolic and significant place with the English nation. The sight of the beach, cliffs, and waves inspire the poet's thoughts throughout the poem. Dover Beach's stunning white cliffs adjoining the beach are an iconic English landmark. These cliffs are formed after millions of years from layers of white chalk, finely grained limestone, and reach the height of about 350 feet. These white cliffs are a stark contrast to the blue waters of the English Channel. The white cliffs are not mentioned only for its aesthetic appeal and visual details, but they hold a symbolic meaning in the poem. Let us look at the form, structure, and style of the poem. Dover Beach is classified as a dramatic monologue. Dramatic monologue is a poem that is in form of speech of an individual or single character to a silent audience. This form of poetry was widely used by Robert Browning and Alfred Lord Tennyson, and it gained popularity in the Victorian Age. Readers found this form to be fascinating and interesting. A dramatic monologue has specific features. It has a sole speaker who addresses a particular audience. In this case, it is an unidentified male speaker who speaks to his wife or beloved. The listener is the silent audience. Another important feature to remember is that the speaker is not the poet. Speaker's persona is different from that of the poet. Speaker, through his speech, reveals the setting of the beach at night. A vivid description enables readers to visualize the setting of the poem, adding a dramatic touch. Following the features of the monologue, Arnold reveals that the speaker is in a melancholic mood, expressing the philosophical crisis of his time. Readers get a fair idea of the speaker's temperament, thoughts, and opinions. Dramatic monologue brings to life not only the speaker but also his conflicts and reactions. Another famous example of dramatic monologue is Robert Browning's My Last Duchess, which is appreciated for its presentation, form, and effect. Poetic devices are used in poetry to enhance its effect and aesthetic value. Here is the analysis of some of the poetic devices used in this poem. Dover Beach consists of 4 stanzas. A stanza is a poetic form that consists of few lines. Dover Beach has 4 stanzas, each varies in length. Stanza 1 has 14 lines, stanza 2 has 6, stanza 3 has 8, and the last final stanza has 9 lines. The poem has no specific or consistent rhyme scheme. It keeps changing in every stanza. The poem is a free verse. Dover Beach is a short lyric. A lyric composition is a poem that expresses the poet's emotions and feelings in form of short stanzas. Arnold uses an elegiac tone to mourn the diminishing faith and the dying morals of the Victorian age.